is Aeternum Radio, broadcasting from the peaks of Shattered Mountain to the New World.
All right, everybody, welcome to episode 2 of Aeternum Radio. We're so excited to have you here today. Today I have my guests with me, my co-hosts, my partners in crime. We have the Raid Master, Ruko.
Hello.
And the game design aficionado, Big Papa.
Howdy.
So today, lots of great stuff has happened in the world of New World. It's been about a week since we last spoke with you. Lots has happened, so let's jump right into the news. First of all, let's go ahead and affirm the release date is still August 31st, 2020. We were just joking off air. Do you think it'll get pushed back? I don't.
Honestly, I don't think so. They've had a few delays already, and it seems like it's in good shape right now. So I don't expect a delay at this point, but you never know.
Every one of those delays has brought us really good content. Like, it's been worth waiting for, in my opinion. If you want to get into the game earlier, you can on July 20th. If you pre-order, you can get into the closed beta. Worth mentioning, though, that there will be a reset. Everybody will be starting from square one on August 31st.
Oh, so no progress you make in the beta will be counted towards the actual live game.
Correct.
Okay.
So everyone who's currently playing in the alpha, when the closed beta happens, they're all hitting reset, and then when the release date happens, everybody resets again.
Cool.
June 11th, New World, Amazon Studios, they did a deep dive with Summer Game Fest, the people who host the Game Awards. And we got to see another look at things. A lot of this had already been familiar. There wasn't any huge content drops, but certainly some stuff worth going over, and we're going to chat about that here today. So Scott Lang, game designer, lead game designer, he was there being interviewed, and he presented some of this material. We talked about how they have added more content to the mid and end game. We spoke a little bit about this last week, how they put in a bunch of content into that mid and end game, and then people kind of blasting right through it. So they slowed down the leveling to make sure you get to enjoy this content that they had put in there. They really have brought a lot more focus into both the PvE and to the PvP side of things since their summer preview last year. Expeditions have been officially introduced. These are 5-man, they're basically classic dungeon. Each expedition has its own unique mechanics, loot, bosses, puzzles, and story, and there should be about 6 at launch. To me, that didn't seem like a very high number. But then again, this didn't originally start as a PvE game. It was a PvP game.
Well, and from what it sounds like, they've only added these in the last year. So the fact that they've been able to kind of implement the entire dungeon system into a pre-existing game within the last year, I actually think 6 is a decent number to start off with. And I'm sure they'll add more, especially for the end game in later patches. So,
yep, I agree. I'm so excited to see how they evolve this in the years to come. So the 6 at launch, they did showcase 3 of them. Amrine Expeditions, which is one of the first dungeons you'll do. It's sort of like an archaeological dig site that you do to go find out more about the Ancients, which are this mystical being that you don't know who they are yet. Then they also talked about Dynasty Shipyards, which looked like it was an outdoor dungeon where it's sort of like this, you're confronting the Empress of Ebonscale, who is trying to like build a fleet, and you go out to stop her. And then the Garden of Genesis is an endgame dungeon that they also showcased, which looked beautiful. Lots of vibrant nature colors. There's this mysterious blight that has come in that you need to corrupt, and that will be an endgame dungeon. So all 3 of those got showcased. If you want to see these, check it out. Just go check out this deep dive that they did. It's on their YouTube channel. Really cool stuff. Went over new zones, Ebonscale Reach, which is the home of the Empress, Taiyang, Reekwater, which is another zone they introduced, this undead swamp piratey looking place. And they kind of defined some of our villains here. Now, in this podcast, we're going to wait until the release date to really deep dive into the lore behind who these characters are and start tying some of these pieces together. But what they've given us, we're going to go ahead and go over. So kind of minor spoilers here, just a little bit. So we have some defined villains. We have Isabella, who is kind of a notable character. If you've seen trailers and stuff, you've seen her around. She's this red-eyed woman. She looks kind of like a Spaniard conquistador almost. the Siren Queen, who looks like she is going to be to me, she looked like she was a dungeon boss, not necessarily like a raid boss kind of a thing. And then the Empress, who we talked about just a little bit earlier. Most of who you encounter, they also defined, will fall into one of three families. You have the Ancients, Corrupted, the Lost, and the Angry Earth. And basically, these are like the enemy types. You know, you have the Lost, which are the undead kind of guys, the Corrupted, which is everyone who's infused with this red mystic stuff, and so they've each kind of got their own little definition. Officially at launch, we will have 11 different weapons, including the Ice Gauntlet, and then Scott Lang went on with a little bit of Q&A, and one of the things that was confirmed, and I know Ruko is super pumped about this, controller support has been confirmed.
Woo!
You can enjoy this action RPG MMO from the comfort of your controller, if you're that kind of a person.
I am that kind of a person. I mean, I love playing action RPGs on the controller. I think in games like this, precise movement is just as important as precise aim. So, and I tend to prefer like going in with melee weapons and stuff where my aim doesn't matter as much anyway. So I don't know. I have more fun on a controller personally, but
Yeah, that's totally fair.
But he goes to great lengths to play on a controller.
sometimes with FPS games, okay, when you get raised on Halo and all you know how to do is play FPS games on a controller.
No, I will say the funniest is playing with you in an FPS game, and I watch a playback of some kill, some death, whatever you call it, the replays, and your character is like turning his camera and it's taking an hour just to turn 90 degrees.
That is true, yes. The downfall of the controller in an FPS game. So, well, a lot of downfalls there, but
and that's when we give you the
fun.
most slack. That's when we give you the most slack,
That's
anyways,
right.
when you play
That's
on the
right.
FPS games.
The Scott Lane also kind of went and emphasized the point, and I really agree that they've done a fantastic job with this, was they listened to player feedback. So a year ago, they had this summer stress test preview kind of an event, and they invited tons of people to come on and play and have a go of it. And really, they took a lot of the feedback to heart. And I know they've gotten a lot of flack over the cash shop, but so far, for me personally, I feel like the designers and the direction I've seen them move in seems like a team I can trust. We've been betrayed before, but things are really being listened to and implemented.
I would agree. I think he said specifically in the last year they've revamped the crafting systems, the weapon mastery systems, the combat, the spawn systems, interrupts, and things like that. I'm guessing that includes like crowd control. All just from player feedback. So I am confident they're going to make good decisions based on player feedback at least. Whether or not that's going to include the cash shop, he did mention the cash shop briefly. He said everyone's going to be on a level playing field. It's not going to be pay to win. It's only going to be cosmetics at launch, but he didn't mention anything about the XP boosts, which we touched on in our last podcast. So
All I know is Slacker has been trying to hype me up for this game for it feels like 2 years now, and every time they've had to push back and postpone the release, which is, again, with the comments we've had so far this video, I get it. It seems like they're making solid ground in the preparation for this release, and I do think that this time it will release, and obviously they've made big changes with the player feedback they have gotten, specifically the PvP system. So yeah. Anyway, I'm excited. I think it will release, and I think they do listen to player feedback, obviously, because they've made huge changes just based on player feedback.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because one of the things that has changed so dramatically and will be a focal point of our episode today is the PvP system. Now, when I got an opportunity to play in the alpha, PvP functioned very differently. As it currently stands and at release, PvP will be a fully opt-in approach, right? If you don't want a PvP, you do not have to. If you do, you can. And this game had initially started as a very real, genuine PvP experience, but that had led to some real exploitation of newer players, of players who weren't doing as well, and things just kind of snowballed. So they did change it. And the system that has helped create that system was the factions, and that is going to be our feature review today. So let's talk about the faction system inside of New World. What are you guys' impressions of it so far? And let's dive into the meat of it.
Factions seem just absolutely awesome. The fact that you get to pick between one of three, I am extremely excited for. 3 seems like it's the magic number, at least for me, and when you need to have a choice in a game. 2 seems like, okay, yeah, you can make a decision here and there. You're probably going to be able to live with it. But 3, you really feel like you're going to have to start doing maybe a little bit more research on these factions, or it's going to be a longer term commitment, and there's going to be serious consequences in more than one way if you don't join other factions. I'm looking forward to this, and I think at least with factions and PvP, having 3 different factions is going to create some interesting PvP opportunities at least. So
I'm excited. I like the idea that there's going to be 3 factions, just like Ruko. I do think, knowing what they had previously, knowing what they've changed to, I do think there's maybe a few missed opportunities, and those are just my opinions. I think it would have been cool had the faction system just been based off the clan or the company system itself. But I still think, like Ruko said, 3 factions. I like the idea that there's a variety. I also like the idea that you cannot leave the faction once you choose it. I like when there are heavy decisions you have to make as a player in an MMO RPG. We talked about that briefly last time, with the player progression, especially when it came to your skills in gathering professions, etc. I like that this is permanent. I like that you have to make a heavy decision, and with all the negatives and positives that come with that.
Now, you can change your faction, but it comes at a heavy cost. You can only switch your faction once every 120 days, and doing so resets all progress you have with any faction, so you got to restart. So, literally, you could only change your faction 3 times a year.
Right.
And it's not possible to join the faction that currently holds the most territory. So let's talk about that. Let's go into a little bit of what this is. So the 3 factions we're referring to are the Marauders, the Syndicate, and the Covenant. And I'm going to read little excerpts just because I think it's important to give these guys a little bit of flavor, especially to emphasize a point I'm going to make a little bit later. So Marauders, this is their blurb. Living examples of the credo, might makes right. The Marauders are a ruthless military force bent on establishing a free nation where anyone with the strength and determination to stake a claim can do so. They look awesome. They have this silver and red-styled, almost a Gothic Roman armor approach. And if you get faction gear, you're going to look like a badass. Okay, then you have the Syndicate. Here's their blurb. Working in the shadows and dealing with secrets, members of the Syndicate use their boundless guile and intellect in pursuit of forbidden knowledge. And the classic Syndicate character has that plague mask, that long beak nose, kind of a flat top hat, and these black robes. And then finally, the Covenant, divine champions who are driven by conviction and their faith in the light of the spark. The Covenant fights with righteousness and justice for the struggling souls of all living things. So you've got these 3 factions, Marauders, and then the Covenant. They're kind of like the religious nuts, right?
The fanatics,
have the fanatics. And if I were to describe their armor set, to me, it almost looks like a Van Helsing armor style. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say
so.
From that Van Helsing movie way back when. I loved that movie when I was a kid.
They remind me of the what's that Warhammer faction? The Inquisition. Anyway, that's what it reminds me of.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so what makes your faction so important? Your choice of faction will be this sphere of influence of who you consider an enemy and who you fight against and who you fight with. Your company or your guild, it's called a company in this game, your company is associated specifically with this one faction. And your company can be up to 100 players. It used to be 50. They just recently expanded that to 100. And working with your faction and with your company, you're going to secure territories inside Aeternum. And what that does, so for example, let's say you see a neighboring territory and your company wants to own it. When your company owns a territory, you get to set the taxes. You get to set the governing rules. How much is fast travel? I'm not sure if it's how much fast travel costs, but there's some very specific things that only you get to determine when you control a territory. And some of that includes player housing, the cost of the auction house, and things like that. So it's actually pretty important who owns the territory. So you see one that you really want to take over with you and your company. You want to go to war. The first thing you got to do is and let's say it's controlled by another faction. The first thing you got to do is destabilize it. And basically you'll do like daily quests in that area to destabilize it while they try to do daily quests to stabilize it. And if you can get it to a certain threshold, that territory will then become in conflict. And at a specific time, and from what I remember, there will be a siege window. And so let's say like you've officially gotten conflict, you get to declare war on this neighboring territory. Your company's going to go for it. You declare war, you got to pay like a buttload of cash to do it. But you're in. You're like, hey, we're going to do this. Your company commits. You have a very narrow window in real time to do a siege. And it's this huge, massive PvP combat where you're attacking this territory's fort. And you're hitting certain objectives and you're trying to take it. And I think it's like 50 on 50 combat. Yeah. It's massive. Yeah. It's huge. And you succeed, you take it, you take the territory, and then you try and make sure your influence doesn't drop so low so that someone can't take it from you. And your company then gets to govern it. So all these companies are working to go to war to try and secure territory, and you work together with other companies of your faction. So that's why they're so important. So the faction you choose really does matter. Here's my big concern. Who didn't play Pokemon Go when it came out in 2016, right? Awesome. Everyone loved it. There were 3 factions, and if you picked the yellow one, you were an idiot. Because everyone picked red and blue, right? And that's what I'm most worried will happen here, is that there will be an overwhelming number of players going Marauder or going Covenant and like nobody going for Syndicate. It could be a different setup, but my biggest concern is that there will unbalance will happen. And when you're playing a game that has so much territory control, if your server is predominantly Marauder, if you don't play Marauder, that sucks.
Yeah.
Well, it sucks, but you can still, unflag yourself from PvP, right?
True, but you can't own the territory.
But you can't own the territory.
You don't get the benefits from owning the territory and things like that. So
I agree with you, and that's one of the biggest concerns from what I've seen of the community, in Reddit and whatnot, is that when they first heard about the factions, they were concerned you'd have 1 or 2 factions being dominant and 1 or 2 factions completely being shut out on a particular server. Now the game, they did say in the article that they're going to provide ways for, minor factions to have some, I don't know if it's a catch-up mechanic. They were very vague, but they did say that their hopes was that it would feel more like you're the underdog rather than you're just completely isolated, and there's no hope for you to take back more territory, but that there would be hope and that you're fighting for the underdog. That would be good. That would be good, but they didn't give specifics. So,
and that's the hard part, because there are clear-cut rewards for gaining territory. So if you own a specific territory, the controlling faction gains 10% increased gathering in the territory, as well as plus 50 luck. On top of which, the controlling company so the faction, everyone in the faction gets that bonus, 10% increased gathering, 50 extra luck. The controlling company receives 70% fast travel discount in the territory, 30% reduced taxes, and 20% reduced housing costs.
That's
big benefits
That's the
there,
company,
right?
not the faction, right? The specific.
That's the
yeah,
company,
that's the
right? Now, to stack on that, I'm under the impression, and I could be wrong, but I'm under the impression that the territories that you control for your faction provide faction-wide bonuses.
They do, yeah.
So if you've taken, I don't know, whether reek water, that provides a specific bonus to your entire faction. So if one faction runs away with this and claims majority of the territory, like,
They'll have all
for
the
example,
bonuses.
exactly, especially in a world where we have streamers and then that kind of culture where everyone's sort of feeding on streamer. I'm super grateful that companies are limited to 100 people.
See, this is where I think
super grateful.
This is well, and that's where I think the missed opportunity was. And maybe I don't understand this fully. I feel like you didn't have to have the faction system. I felt like with companies having a limit to 100 people, and you just base it off of the companies themselves, the player created, groups, the guilds, companies, whatever you want to call them, they take over territories as a company. And with 100 people, you can only manage so much. Eventually you're going to have one or two of your territories being undermined, and it's going to be in constant flux. But then you're not going to have this one faction, because most of the companies in the game, in this server, belong to this one faction dominating. You're not going to have that. You'd have many companies controlling different areas, and that would be in a constant state of flux, which is what I think they want. So I felt like that was a missed opportunity. I didn't think even though the factions are cool, they almost feel like they're just tagged on at this point, to unite, just to delineate who you can PvP against. I thought the guild, they had it with the company system. I don't know, maybe you guys think differently, but
I was gonna say I don't know. I think we're speculating a lot on how we think it's gonna play out. I don't know that one faction is gonna be super dominant or be able to be super dominant. They did mention that they are going to balance this, so that it's not. And maybe what happens is, companies with lower territory have an easier time attacking companies with more territory, right? Maybe they just do more damage to the fort or things like that, more damage in general, so that they can actually stay relevant. Um, I don't know. I don't feel like one faction is just going to run away with it, or even two factions are going to just run away with it on a particular server, but we'll have to wait and see. You bring up that thing with Pokemon Go, and I think that was more based off of what color people liked. Nobody liked yellow, the color yellow, apparently. I think there's a lot more interesting rewards with the specific covenants that are going to keep people wanting to go after those specific wards and join those covenants for that reason, not necessarily just because they like the color or the name of the faction. So I don't know. There's some other concerns I have with actually how the war process works, because companies can participate in a war, but only one company can own the territory, and you can have
Right.
multiple companies
Vie
fighting
for
in
the
this war.
yeah.
Right. And what ends up happening, they've said, is it actually gets selected at random which company becomes this vanguard for the war, and they have to go out and
Yeah,
recruit
if
people.
multiple from the same side
Well,
are declaring war on
I
one.
have my own worries about that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good point.
I understand why they do it. They want, if you have a small company, maybe it's just a group of close-knit friends.
Even a company
and
of one, they said. Even a company of
even
one.
if, even a
Yeah.
company of one, even if you're just by yourself, they want you to have an opportunity to have land or control a territory at some point, which I get, but I don't feel like having it randomly selected is a
No.
great way to
What
do
what they
that.
could have done, in my opinion, is they could have just had it be a race to who could undermine. I mean, obviously, you're still going to have the bigger guilds doing it faster, so I get again why they did it randomly. But you could have had. I thought it would have been cool if it had been a race to undermine that faction faster than your other allies or your other companies that are in the same faction as you. If you undermine them quicker enough, you have the option to declare war. Maybe that wouldn't have worked out, but and like you said, we'll have to see. Obviously, we're speculating here, but it is a valid concern. A valid point being raised that in games, in MMOs specifically, you will find imbalance in which factions player choose, in server by server, server to server, right? Even WoW offers free server transfers from time to time just because of imbalance between Horde and Alliance. So I think it is a valid concern. You're right. We'll have to wait and see. And I think the devs are gonna. I'm excited for it because I love the idea of like the fact that you control a territory matters. I love that. I think that's going to be awesome. It's going to give you a reason to PvP.
I agree.
So just that alone is giving me hope that it's going to work out. But still, I think it is a valid concern. And there are questions. There are other concerns, like you said, with the random thing. I'm not a huge fan of that. I thought it could have been done differently.
Well, and the other concern with this random thing is they specifically mentioned, you don't have to help that company capture the territory. So if
you don't like them.
Well, if you don't like them, or maybe your company is really big and you're just like, we're just not going to help them. We're going to let them fail, and then we're going to try and take over it again.
Well, then do you have to re-undermine the other...
I'm sure you do.
I'm almost positive it's got like a time lock after it's been captured.
But it seems like you could almost be intentionally trolly or intentionally harmful to your own faction for a selfish long-term gain, instead of letting these other players, have some territory. It seems not like that part of the system is going to need to be fleshed out a little bit more, because
remember though, you will as a faction gain pretty significant advantages to owning that territory. I think it's still always going to be in your interest to help other people claim territories for your faction, just because you're going to get so many bonuses out of that, even if your one particular company isn't after it. And maybe they have a limit on how many territories a company can control.
That's possible. And they specifically mentioned maybe you don't like the company, maybe they have higher taxes than you want in that area, because the company still does control things like that. So maybe you don't want them to have it because you don't want them to have higher taxes or whatever in a particular territory.
But you can't undermine you can't undermine a company in your own faction, though.
No, you can't. You can't do that. But I would hate to see
just not join them in war. Essentially, is what you're saying.
You can just not join them, right? You could choose.
And if they're mismanaging the territory that you're living at, you move. If you're like, dude, you've jacked up the prices, I'm not going to make this my home base anymore. I'm going to go somewhere else and put my player housing somewhere else.
What I don't want to see is like for a small company that just they just want to have fun and they want to get their territory, finally get their shot to own some territory, and nobody will help them because they want it for their own company, right? That would feel really bad for those players, and I hope that's what it doesn't devolve into. So I'm hoping that the devs take a little bit closer look at this system, maybe not make it random, maybe make it something you can work towards and then initiate or vie for within a territory, but having something random or having it so the entire rest of the server could opt out of helping you capture a territory. I don't know. That seems a little strange.
If it can be done, it will be done. And if no one had thought of it before now they know that they could potentially do that. Thanks, Ruko.
Sorry, I mean, I'm an expert at trolling people in video games, so what can I say? So
that is a very true statement.
So there's another aspect of this, though, that I have raised eyebrows about, is that I'm really looking forward to this war aspect, this 50 on 50 claiming territory. There's something real at stake. That I always feel that when PvP has something at stake, it makes it much more exciting. In fact, I think even in the game, if you're doing world PvP, you got your flag flipped on, if you kill another player, you actually still get to loot them. It won't be their loot per se, but you can still find like loot on the players that you kill. So there's that incentive there, right? With these big wars that I'm really looking forward to, and you're storming a fortress and you're hitting these points, which sounds awesome and I love it. It's in a very specific window of time. Now, right now, I'm working from home. I mean, who's not? It's COVID, right? A lot of us are working from home. A lot of us, what do you do if you can't make that siege window? If you're in class, if you're working, you can't make it. That's going to be a huge bummer. I really hope my dream solution is that the attacker could pick a window of time that works for their company and say, hey, we're actually going to attack tomorrow, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, and then the defenders would have to gather forces for that. I really hope that's the case, as opposed to being like, all right, we're just going to randomly slot a time. This is going to be the time. hope you have people
Like, give
online
us
at
at
that
least
time.
a 24-hour window where we can plan the siege, and that would feel even more realistic. Because in war, you would plan when you attack, right? I agree with you on that. I also think uh, that well, one thing kind of in line with this is even if your company, from what I understand, if not everyone in your company can join the war, you can have people from anywhere amongst the faction to join, right? The other companies can still join, and that's how you can
Yes.
have a
Yeah.
single player company start a war, and people can choose to join from other factions or from within the faction other companies.
Sure, so the numbers will be there, but if I've done all this work to, undermine the faction to my north because I really want this territory, I've been really working on it, and then I see that the siege window is when I got to pick up kids from daycare, that sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that the opportunities are maybe a little bit more frequent than we're currently thinking. I'm hoping that it's more that territories are continually in flux, right? Maybe there's gonna be multiple sieges a day throughout Aeternum, and you'll have multiple opportunities. So I hope that's how it plays. I hope you can log on and within maybe an hour or two, siege is starting that you could participate in. You also got to remember that the enemy faction is also going to be attacking your territory, so you'll be able to participate in these defensive sieges too. And so it's gonna go both ways. I hope the opportunities are um, frequent enough that it's not a problem. But if it is gonna be more of a sparse thing, then I would agree. Be able to schedule a time, or at least have it notify people when it's gonna happen, with at least several hours of notice, so people
Right.
can get on and participate or plan.
You may actually see the siege window. Now that I'm looking at something here, you may actually see the siege window before you even declare war. So you can see before I declare war on this territory when its siege window would be, and if that works for me and my company.
Man, it would be cool if you could plan it, honestly. But on the flip
Yeah.
side of what Ruka was saying, I do hope that it's not. I hope it does take some time and some effort to.
Sure.
Obviously, you have to undermine them, and at the same time, there's PvP quests on the defensive side to retain their status or their
Influence.
influence.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Um, and I love that. I really do. I love that the PvP quests, their quests designed to undermine or to retain your influence, and you're automatically flagged for PvP if you have one of those quests. I think that's a really cool idea. But I do hope it does take some time, only because you don't want to control a territory for a couple hours, right, or a day, or however long. It would be nice if once you got control of a territory, it would take a little while, before someone already undermines it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It should be stated also that we are still in a closed beta. We are not currently playing the game. We are not currently. No, I mean, like, hardly anybody is. Everyone who's so psyched about this game doesn't have an opportunity to play it. So we can only speculate what's on paper and based on what we've seen from other games. But maybe they nail it. Maybe it's awesome. And I really, really, really hope that it is, because it sounds amazing to me. Don't get me wrong. Don't take my my worried notes here. Don't mistake it for not being excited, because I'm very excited for what they've built.
Yeah, I think we've expressed a lot of concern about the system, but overall, I'm really excited for this territory control thing out. Like, it's gonna make the world feel real and evolving, and like I have an actual impact on what's going on in the game. That's
Yes.
absolutely awesome.
That's so cool.
100%.
Especially in an MMO. Yeah. And even in World of Warcraft's latter days, you have quest lines where the world kind of evolves around you as you play through it. The most notable I can think of is like when you play the intro into Warlords of Draenor, and you go around and that was the first time I was like, oh man, like the world is changing as I'm doing this quest.
Yeah.
And people are instanced in these different variations of the quest. And I was sort of like faking that feeling that you were having a real impact in the world. This one you genuinely do, and you can build a company, you can get your buddies together, and you can claim some real land and have player housing. These are like things that people have wanted from MMOs for so long, and we haven't gotten it yet, and here it is. Oh gosh, please be good.
One of my favorite things in an MMO is world PvP. And so the fact that you can get a quest to go defend your territory from actual players, like I love that is encouraged. I think that's a fantastic idea, and Ruko and I love going out and killing as many horde as we can see, or whatever faction we're on, the opposite faction, and the fact that we are encouraged to do that, it's designed in the game. Hopefully there will be people will always be constantly trying to undermine and have to come into our territory so we can go out and kill them, or vice versa. I think that's an awesome idea.
Well, yeah, one of the PvP missions they mentioned specifically to help undermine the territory was just patrolling the area and killing the enemy faction there.
Yes.
Right? That's an actual mission you go out, and usually you just do that as a side thing, and but this is actually part of what you do. I think that's great. I think it's fun to just patrol around.
You get rewards
and engage
for doing
in world PvP. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You get rewards for doing it.
And with the combat system like they've designed, which we're going to be going over in a later episode, it's going to be fun. It's going to be. This is not tab targeting. This is skill shots, and it's going to be very fun to do this combat system. It's going to be even more fun to do the PvP. I'm really
I thought it was tab targeting, but I noticed in the video that there was no tab targeting. This is much more like Skyrim type combat where you have to aim and.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I always thought it was tab targeting with some, action, with action oriented gameplay, but you still targeted and had to time a dodge and stuff. But no, I was wrong.
No, this was pretty much full action combat. So.
Yeah.
With controller support.
With controller support. Yeah.
Okay, so here's a big question. Obviously, especially for all you listeners out there, we're definitely going to be putting together a company for Aeternum Radio and everyone who's listening. So maybe we should be doing a poll or something. We'll probably do that a little bit closer to release date. But as it stands right now, what faction are you most leaning towards?
The Syndicate, personally, but I always kind of like those stealth shadow factions that try to just infiltrate things and are a little more secretive, personally. But that's just my first hunch on what I would choose.
Ruko loves being sneaky and sinister. Yeah, all his
which is
ironic.
I hate stealth games, man. But yes, doing things, thematically, it's fun.
Well, see, I typically don't like. I'm actually with Ruko. I usually like playing, a darker faction or a more secretive faction. So the Syndicate definitely piqued my interest. But I will say this: I generally don't like the holy, classes or the holy factions.
The fanatics,
the zealots, right? I'm not a huge. Generally, it just doesn't interest me. But I think New World has done a really good job with this faction to make it stand out a little bit. It interested me when I read about it. Purifying this crazy new world. I don't know, and they look sick. They really do. They look. They look cool in their armor. So all the factions. I'm surprised I'm saying this, but all the factions did interest me a little bit. Mostly
But you're leaning towards Covenant?
Well, so yeah, that's the fanatic ones, right? I don't think I'm leaning towards them. I think I'm leaning towards Syndicate still. I'm just making a point to say that a faction that I normally wouldn't be interested in, I'm actually interested in. I think they did a good job with the theme of that faction. And the only other reason I'm interested in what was the first faction? The Conquistador.
The Marauders.
The Marauders. I like their motto. Like they're all about, building a free world. That appeals to me. So I hate saying that I like a little bit of each faction, but if I were to pick one, I'm leaning towards Syndicate, just like Ruko.
Syndicate is by far my least favorite. I hate
I called it. I knew that was coming.
Poor Slacker hates the Syndicate. Okay.
Oh gosh.
You're probably leaning towards the Covenant, aren't you?
I actually think the Marauders look sick. I think of the Roman Conquistador, red and silver. I'm all for it, and having that strength. Oh, it's very horde to me, and I really, really like that. Oh man, we're definitely going to leave it up to a poll then, and please do not be Syndicate. They're going to end up being Team Yellow in Pokemon Go. Just wait, I'm calling it. Dude.
The Syndicate or the Marauders? Yeah, the Marauders are.
The Syndicate. Oh. Maybe.
I think Syndicate will be very popular. I think a lot of people generally tend to. That's the only reason I'm hesitant about we'll see. Obviously, it's all speculation, but I have a feeling that's going to be popular, a very popular faction, and I generally would rather go for an underdog. Once the factions are established.
And we're looking at armor sets of like one character for the whole faction. And gosh, I wish you couldn't because it was under the NDA. But when I played last time, I did get the chance to play through. Each of these factions will send you on their own little quest. At least it did in the game. Ooh, I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but you got a feel for how each of them kind of looked and felt, and I wish I would have paid more attention because all I've got right now in front of me are these armor sets, and I'm like, dude, Marauders.
If we're going
awesome.
off of these armor sets, I would say the Marauders don't look as good as the other ones. That's my opinion, though. I look at that Plague Doctor mask.
I think you're
that's so awesome. And look at the
How do you not like the Plague Doctor mask?
You guys like ugly stuff. Let me tell you what.
We're not.
We play games. For the record, all of our listeners should know this. Whenever we play a game and there's a customer creative option, Big Papa makes the ugliest looking character you could possibly fathom.
That is true.
Time.
Only in World of Warcraft because I've done it a ton of times.
No.
That's
Sea of Thieves.
Oh, that's true. That's
if Rainbow Six Siege had a build your own character option. I don't even want to know what your me looks like in like the Wii U store or whatever, the Nintendo. I don't know.
Oh, well, so here's what I was going to say, Slacker, is that, me and Ruko in real life, we're really good guys. And so we tend to go for those evil factions in games. I don't know what it's like for you, but I don't know.
Oh, it's the same. Yeah, that's fair. I'll take that.
all our negativity and evil comes out in World PvP in video games. That's just.
Oh, I love PvP. I love that. I'm so excited. I think this is going to feel really good. Getting a group together and going into a territory that has a lot of the enemy faction because they control it. Doing those quests because it's not just like it's not going to be like daily quests. The quest is go kill them. That's going to be so fun. And with this action, I'm so excited.
I agree. I'm pumped for that.
Okay, so let's move on to our final topic for the evening or day, whenever you're listening, and that's going to be our opinion segment. And what we're talking about today is it's kind of going along this PvP theme, is how do PvP and PVE, work together in an MMO? We see a lot of different games take very different approaches to this. And, let's take, for example, we'll start with World of Warcraft and how the game started by having this open PvP system where, if you saw Horde, you could kill them, they could kill you. There was kind of the threat there.
Well,
but then it also
only on
excelled
specific servers, so keep that in mind.
And specific servers, and only in specific areas. There were some that are controlled, and to be fair.
Which was a good way of doing it.
So it was still restricted.
Honestly, I thought for their time, they had a really good PvP system.
But they win in PvE. World of Warcraft raiding is phenomenal. Their dungeons, the mythic system, pushing keys, doing your getting through the raids, the story that's a part of that is integral to World of Warcraft. And if you were to say, how's PvP in World of Warcraft? It's not great. It hasn't been great for a long time because the game's not really a PvP game anymore. Even if you're a PvP player, it's just not. It's a PvE game in my mind.
Are you talking structured PvP though, or all of it?
Both.
Yeah.
I mean, the structured PvP is fine, but it's very instanced. It's very. Alterac Valley is a perfect example where that battleground. And if you haven't played World of Warcraft, there's a specific battleground where the two factions got to kill the enemy's king in the castle, right? And to do that, you got to take out these outposts along the way. And so that sounds very much like a tug of war, but in reality, in practice, both factions just run right past each other and go straight to the king. There's really no interaction. It's still a PvE game in their most famous PvP battleground. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. I've thrown a lot at you guys. Tell me your opinions.
World of Warcraft's PvP has gotten stale, and that's always a concern, is that the PvP gets stale in an MMO. You have a limited number of actions, you have a limited number of classes. Sooner or later, you're going to go up against every class, and I guess it's not really classes in this game, but weapon types and things like that. You're going to learn how to counter them, you're going to learn how to play around it, And once you've kind of figured out how to do that, where do you go from there in terms of PvP? I still think it can be fun, engaging, and just it's always fun to dominate another player. I guess for lack of a better word, which is why I think World PvP is great. Some of these structured PvP activities tend to get old though over time, and so we'll have to see how that plays out with wars if they're very repetitive and things like that. Where they're just not as appealing to participate in the more you do them.
I
To be fair, it should be noted that New World did also add in something called an outpost rush, which will be like a battleground.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
did.
I think I'm with Ruko on this about the structured PvP. It does tend to get stale, and but here's the thing: in World of Warcraft, that's PvP is one of my favorite things about the game. Is I love being able to use my class to its fullest potential, going up against someone equally skilled and oftentimes better than me and trying to outplay them. And I thought, like I said earlier, for its time, the way they structured it, it was simple. If you're in your own territory, an alliance controlled territory, or or a horde, whatever it is, you're pretty safe unless you attack that enemy if they're in your territory. If you're in contested territory, it's anyone's game. And I thought that was simple, but it brought enough PvP into the game while you were questing that it was great. The problem you run into is the focus is getting to end game. So at a certain point, everyone's max level. And if you're leveling a
Right.
character behind the curve, the zones are dead. So but again, I thought that it was a good design because it gave you some safety when you're leveling in your own faction controlled zones, but you were still pushed into. You eventually had to go into contested zones, and you had to quest there, and boom, world PvP. And there's always this like tension whenever you come across someone from the other faction questing, and you're like, oh shoot,
Yeah,
like I just want to get this one mob so I can get the item and get out of here. Is he?
yeah.
Are we gonna do this,
Are
or
we gonna? Yeah,
are you gonna attack me when I'm half health?
that's right. You accidentally pull a little bit too much, and then suddenly you're dead
It's
because they attack you.
and I'll admit, I'm an opportunist in those matters. So
Yeah. Of course, yeah. Yeah, of course.
But anyway, so I do, but I agree when it comes to the structured PvP, it just doesn't seem to work very well in World of Warcraft, and you don't get that world PvP all the time because of people are eventually going to be all max level, and you're not going to run into people in the world at that point very rarely at all.
Let me speak to that though for a real bit, because I think that we use World of Warcraft a lot as a model because we're very actively playing it right now. That being said, I have seen instanced PvP done really, really well, and I've seen that in Guild Wars too. I have not raided in Guild Wars. I haven't played any of its end game content, but I have done its battlegrounds. And Ruko, I'm not sure if you've played, but I played with Big Papa and another mutual friend of ours, and we loved it. It felt very quick. It felt very action focused, and maybe that was not necessarily what makes PvP stale. Isn't so much the instance PvP, but the style of combat of tab targeting, because Guild Wars 2 is a hybrid
Yeah.
model of that, and it makes the PvP feel very active, feel very mobile, feel very on the move, and I really like that. And I really like that. And I think that New World's is gonna play on that really well. So I think that instance PvP can work. I think the instance PvP can work and feel fluid with the right combat system.
Yeah, I don't think that it can't work. I just think in a game like World of Warcraft, it's just gotten stale. They're out of ideas on how to make it work and how to get players to engage with each other more within a battleground. Um, and so it doesn't become fun. I mean, you end up usually with one side kind of just sitting staring at the other side waiting for one side of the attack, or maybe both teams have the
Right.
enemy flag and you're just kind of turtling in your own bases waiting for a miracle to happen. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes there's not enough. Sometimes there's just not enough opportunities in the structured PvP activities to keep players engaged. And I hope that the combat system in New World does change that. That even within structured PvP, it's still going to be fun because the combat itself is just fun,
Right.
and you're not getting bored where in a game like World of Warcraft where you're just mashing the same button over and over again, right? You're not thinking about it, right?
I think Slacker has a point there. I think that maybe it does come down to the combat system itself and what it can do, what you can do with it. Because Guild Wars 2 combat, and structured PvP was a lot of fun, and we did have a ton of fun for the time we played it. In WoW, just one last comment. I would say that I do like arenas. I like being pitted up in a pure contest of skill, but like Ruko said, eventually all the tricks of going up against those classes, and there's so many buttons you can press, and you know it's a matter of who can do certain things quicker than the other, and I don't know, it can get stale at that point, but still fun. I still enjoy that. That just pure contest of skill going up against what a group or small group of in PvP and seeing who comes out on top.
So let's talk a little bit about why instanced PvP even exists, because I think that its place in an MMO is quite unique, because what we see happening is we see games having to make a decision whether you are a PvP or a PvE game. And if you're a PvE game and you want some PvP action, you put it in an instanced form. And we struggle seeing, what I think is heartbreaking, is the PvP games end up defaulting to that model. The games like, for example, we keep going back to this because I think it's just such a great example. Games like Sea of Thieves thrive as a PvP environment because it is what it is. It's this, every pirate for themselves. You've got your crew. You're worried about every ship on the horizon because they're going to come and take your loot.
It's designed into the game,
and people have petitioned. Exactly,
it's because there's PVE in there, but it's designed about it's designed around you're a pirate, and pirates are going to kill other pirates if they have the opportunity. So it's
and with that PVE being brought into the game, though, you have now players saying like, "Dude, I just want to do PVE. I don't want to get ganked while I'm got my nose down a hole getting treasure."
You're a pirate,
exactly. And that's But that's the point, though, that I want to come back to New World with, is that, people have that, we really want PvE content, or the PvP is too much. Are we looking for new solutions, or are we pigeonholing ourselves back to that classic model of having instant PvP versus the instant PvE because people want to play that, and then you get this opt-in. And, if I'm being honest, I actually really like retail's version of having the opt-in, PvP system, where if I want to do PvP, which I always do, I opt myself in, which I always do, I get extra rewards and I get to play the game the way I want to play it. And if you don't want to opt yourself in, you don't have to, and you get that choice, and I'm okay with that. But I don't want us to lose what's great about a PvP game, because, like you mentioned before with Sea of Thieves, it's because you're a pirate, man, and you got to be worried about people coming after your loot. And in New World, I want you to feel that as well. I want you to feel like that other company, that other faction is still very threatening to you. And do I go after their territory because they keep farming out of our lands? Or do we make other decisions? Like, I like that interaction. I like that discussion. I don't want to lose it. I don't want us to end up pigeonholing back to that instanced PvP form because that's just what works. This is something new. This is something fresh. Let us work it, mold it, make it better.
So I have a lot of thoughts on this. When I first started playing MMOs, I absolutely hated World PvP, and I think a lot of people go into MMORPGs are initially looking for the PvE side of it, right? RPGs are designed to be playing against, an intelligent computer foe, more or less. You're not really designed necessarily to play against other players, at least not on the base level. Everyone who plays an MMORPG has to do PvE content. That's just how you get through the game. And honestly, up until I played Sea of Thieves, I was very much in the camp every MMORPG should have opt-in, opt-out type scenarios. But playing that game has changed my perspective. Playing Sea of Thieves has changed my perspective on how rewarding it can be to have mandated PvP, or at least being because it makes you more cautious. And when you pull off something where the enemy could have attacked you, it feels that much better to pull it off. And I understand it's also that much more frustrating when you don't. I still think I agree with the model that they're going for here with an opt-out. I'm never going to opt out of PvP myself. but I know some people are just going to want to go through and play the content, and that's fine, because they have turned the game more into a PvE, a PvE focused game, and made PvP equally important to it. People are just they're going to have their preference on whether they want to do it. Um, so opting out, I think, is going to be okay, but it does make me sad because there are a lot of just really hype moments you can get from those PvP scenarios, where you're still doing PvE content and you manage to pull it off with a PvP, or being attacked by another faction. It just feels so good, and some people are just never going to get that opportunity by opting out of PvP. So
It's the lows and highs of that kind of game, right? Because
yeah,
you, like you said, you're going to fail, and that sucks. But then you're driven, if you have the right attitude, you're driven to try again and do better next time, right? And then when you succeed, it's just that much more rewarding in a game.
that's true. And I'm just going to play devil's advocate real
Sure.
quick though, because there are times in like Sea of Thieves where we've gone out and we've tried to attack a ship and we've failed miserably. Like, okay, what did we do wrong? Okay, we're gonna go back. Okay, we're gonna try this again, and we go back and we fail miserably again and again and again. Right? You guys know what
Happens
I'm.
too often.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it,
Oh, yeah.
and sometimes you just get outclassed, and that can get frustrating. Right? I totally understand that, and so maybe. Which is why I think it's fine in this game where you have a lot more PvE content. Um, to opt out of it if you're just gonna get dominated
I think
by
I think that's
somebody
what
else.
most people are worried about are the
Yeah.
trolls that will just camp your corpse or continually, you know, just pester you and dominate you, and you feel like you have no chance to even
Right.
enjoy the
I'm sure
content.
streamers are already sweating about stream snipers, right? Camping your corpse. So
Right. Well, that was the concern expressed apparently in alpha when they had full world PvP and and full loot PvP. Um, that seemed to be the concern. And that's why they changed it in the first place. But I think MMOs are maybe starting to go in the right direction when it comes to mixing open world PvP with PvE content. When it comes down to these kind of hub territory controlled aspect where there are ways controlling areas matters. It gives you bonuses, and taking away territory is a part of the game. So you always have to constantly be concerned about my faction is losing territory, and therefore I'm losing bonuses to my leveling or to my money making, whatever. So I need to help fight against these, and that's built into the game. So I think it has a chance of being successful. There's another MMO that's been in constant development, which is Ashes of Creation. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but that one has that same. From the last time I checked, and it's been a while, but they had that similar idea of we're going to have these hubs, and they're player controlled in the game. And they can be taken away, but when you do control them, you get bonuses. You control the area, you set the tax rates, blah blah blah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's the direction MMOs seem to be going. I think it's a good direction because I think building PvP into the game and not just tacking it on the side can create, I don't know, positive gaming experience as long as there is some way you can either avoid it or still enjoy your PvE content without having to constantly face PvP.
I think what this does is this boils down to, for me at least, is when you sit down to develop your game, and you've got that theme, and you've got an idea, and you know what direction you want to go in, you have to ask yourself, who tells the story? Because if the story is being told by the NPCs in the game, then it's a PvE game. And you play through this game and your heroes, whatever the case may be, and you go through raid bosses and whatever. If the person who tells the story are players, then it's a PvP game. And that goes back to that comment that we made earlier. It's like, you're a pirate. You're living in a pirate world. The stories we get from Sea of Thieves, while there are actual stories there, the ones that we take home with us are the stories of, man, do you remember that one time when we were sailing, we had all that loot and we got hit by a kraken? Oh, we barely survived, and then we got attacked by a meg and we lost it all. That was crazy. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Or is the story, do you remember what happened with Jaina last expansion? That was nuts. I can't wait to see what happens when we do this raid and she's a boss inside of it. Like, where's the story coming from? Is it coming from the NPCs, or do you want it to come from the players? And I petition that in New World, the story is coming from the players. The story that's developing is happening with the way that you're controlling territory, and that's what we're going to walk away with. That's what I really want to walk away with. And it'll have a sprinkling in of these dungeons and maybe raids that'll be like a cherry on top. But the stories you tell will be these PvP events, and I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm going to enjoy the PvP aspect more so than the PvE aspect in this game, and which is a little bit strange for me because I tend to gravitate towards PvE in a lot of these games. But I think you're right. Having those stories to tell from these big epic PvP combats or narrow escapes or things like that, those feel just awesome, and they're very comparable to what you feel when you kill a raid boss, right? In World.
Right.
So it's gonna be one of those things that people are just gonna have to decide if they want to give it a try, because I know some people are hesitant to do any PvP at all. And that's fine. I understand different play styles, but I would encourage people give it a shot at least, and if you don't like it, that's fine, opt out. But I do feel a little bit of reminisce that they didn't stick with the initial idea of just making it full on PvP like Sea of Thieves. We brought up how Sea of Thieves has had lots of people say, please make PvE servers so I don't have to get attacked. I think that would water down the game experience significantly to the point where it's just not that fun. Honestly, the PvE activities, they've gotten better in Sea of Thieves over time, but it's not as fun when you don't have that constant threat that somebody could come get you and attack you at any point, right? You're always looking over your shoulder, and if you don't have to do that, it's just, why bother going sailing at all? I mean, it's just kind of a digging simulator at that point.
Yeah.
So
I'll say again that some of my fondest memories, or the things I remember most, even in World of Warcraft, which is a PvE focused game, was the world PvP, and very, very rarely do I remember or have fond memories of. You're not going to remember, oh man, do you remember that time I had to go and loot 50 different NPCs just to get 5 items for a quest? That you're not going to remember that.
No, but to be fair, you've never killed raid bosses.
That's true.
Okay?
I have
and
not.
That is that can be an epic.
That's fair, because that is PvE contact that you're experiencing with a group, and that's one of the points I was going to get to. Is the other aspect when it comes to PvE content is the things I remember most are things I've done with groups, things I've done with my friends, and that we've had to struggle to accomplish. And I think that's the silver lining in either PvE or PvP is it's got to be challenging, and then it will be memorable once you succeed, especially. So,
and it can be memorable even if you don't succeed, and
that's true.
So I think it creates good opportunities all around. So.
Yeah.
And I think just to tie us up here, the coolest part about all this, and especially with what we've talked about today, when we look back at it, is that New World has the potential to give us those stories, to give us those camaraderie building events of forming a company, getting a group of buddies, taking down other territories, losing territories, fighting for it back. All of that looks on paper to be built in there. And while, yes, there are some things we're worried about these systems that could be detrimental to that process, that storytelling excitement of PvP, I think, is there. And that's what makes this game just so intriguing.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
Well, that is our episode for today. Our next time, we're going to be talking a lot more in depth about the combat system. We're going to talk about the different weapons that are available, the different trees, what we like, what we're excited for, and we'll share some cool resources with you that you'll be able to go and see what you like before the game is even released. So stick with us. Follow us if you're listening to us on Spotify, on Apple, wherever we're at. make sure you follow us. You can follow us on Twitter as well, where we'll be saying, hey, look, we posted this, or this is something new that's coming up. Soon, we've got to have the poll to prove to these two that Syndicate is not the way to go for our company.
No,
Set
we
yourself
Syndicate
up
all
for
the way.
disappointment there, Slacker.
We'll release a poll. We will we'll build ourselves a Discord here in the near future, and we'll make sure you all get invited to it. We can continue this conversation off the air. So again, reach out to us. Let us know what you thought about this episode on Twitter. Give us a shout out, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week. So from me, Slacker,
And from Big Papa.
And Ruko.
we've really enjoyed having you guys. We look forward to talking to you next week. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.